welcome to this week's episode of War Games Geek. This week I'm starting a small project which is going to be some gladiators for a game that I'd like to put together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with painting some human figures, and then I'm going to go on to some wild animals, lions and bears and things like that. And then I'm going to finish off with putting a small ludus together from the Sarissa Precision range. So this week what I've done is I've started off with the Rhetarius, and this chap is, Retiarius literally means netman, and he was styled on that of a fisherman with a weighted net, and then the sort of three-pronged trident that he's carrying there. And they would have also had a small dagger as a sort of backup weapon. So what I've done is I've already primed him with barbarian flesh from the Army Painter range. That's the spray paint. And now what I'm doing is I'm going in and doing his hair, and the colour I'm using for that is desert yellow. So I'm just being careful here around the ear, and just trying not to get the yellow onto the skin colour, because as I say, that really will be probably the final colour. And then what I'm doing next is I'm painting in pure red, again from the Army Painter range, and that is for the loincloth on this figure. And the Latin pronunciation of that is almost unpronounceable to me, subligatulum. So there we are. So what I'm doing is I'm going to do two teams, and what I'm doing is I'm going to do one team of 4 figures, and I'll be doing this over the next few weeks. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do some of them with red loincloths to identify them as one team, and the rest I'm going to do in a blue colour just to sort of separate them. And what I'm going to do is hopefully I'll get different models for these. So this Retiarius chap, there's another one I've found online, so I've ordered that, and he's in a different pose. So I'm just making sure they're from the same sort of range and the same sort of scale, otherwise they look a bit daft if they're sort of heroic scale compared to just your sort of standard 28mm. So what I'm doing then is I'm doing the outside of the loincloth, and I'm using demonic yellow for that, and so just being careful around not sort of getting that onto the red and onto the pink of the flesh, which is the finished colour. So really taking my time here. I'm using a really small brush for this, very fine detail brush, and just move the figure around so that it suits you. You don't have to move your hands around the figure. Move the figure to suit you. I'm left-handed, I've just tipped him up there, and I can get into that corner a little bit easier. So just taking my time there, trying not to make any sort of mistakes. But as I've said before in previous videos, if you do, the primer paints from the Army Painter range, they are an exact match to the actual bottled paints. So if you do go over the edge slightly, then you can always tidy it up afterwards, and it's not going to be a different shade of pink, if you like. So just taking my time there, that's starting to look rather nice. So once I've done that, what I'm going to do now is move on to the next bit, which is the leg guard. And for that, I'm using skeleton bone. So when I looked on Google at the Google images for this, they pretty much do just look like bandages. They are padded, but of course they're not going to sort of stop much in the way of a big axe blow or a sword sort of stab towards the shin. The idea of the Rhetarius, he was often pitted against sort of more heavily armed opponents, and what he would do is he would wait for his opponent to strike, and then he would do a sort of counter strike himself, trying to snatch out the sword from his opponent's hand and that sort of thing. So not very well armoured at all. He's just got this sort of one big piece on his shoulder, the opposite shoulder that you can see at the moment. So there we are. So that's the first leg done. Just get a bit more paint on the brush, and then we'll do the other side. So again, just the skeleton bone on both of these. Obviously, they're sort of kind of matching padding for his legs. He didn't wear any footwear. He was barefoot, so it had that to contend with as well. And what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've done the left arm, the padding on the left arm as well. So that's those bits done. Now the padding on the arm guards are called manica. That's the Latin for that. And then what we're doing now is I'm just painting in this sort of wide belt. So he would have worn either a wide belt or a short tunic. Again, the tunic would have had light padding. This chap is, as you can see in the loincloth, So it's going around the back now and just painting in this wide belt. The colour I'm using for this is leather brown on the belt there. So again, just taking my time now, just making sure I don't go over the edges, but again, I can touch up if I need to, if I do make any mistakes. And yeah, just turning them around and just making sure that that's all done. So it's really starting to take shape now. Just going to go in and just finish off that. You can't see that because it's right in the gap between the trident and the belt, but just finishing off that bit of belt. So here we are. So the Rhetarius didn't wear any headwear at all. That wasn't part of his kit. So he, as you can see, very lightly armed. The video I'll be doing for next week, I'll be doing a Murmillo. So do stay tuned for that next week. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so. It really does help. And you can see me doing a more sort of heavily armoured figure. So what I'm doing now is I'm just painting in the handle of the trident, and for that I'm using Monster Brown, and just taking my time there, going in against the skin of the hand, and there's that sort of tricky bit just the other side of his hand on the inside. I'll do that in a moment, just come around and do the easy bits first. So that's Monster Brown there, and then we're coming down the shaft of the trident, and then there is another sort of metal piece at the other end, sort of weighted at the other end. So that's starting to take shape now. I'm just going to come in and do the underside of the, just take my time there. I think I might have a little bit too much paint on the brush, so I'm just going to spread that out. That's it. And just trying to make sure I've covered it all. And then we have that sort of tricky bit to do inside the arm there. I know you can't see that because my thumb's in the way. Let's try and, yeah, there we are. So you can just about see me doing that there now. So that's the shaft of it just about done. There's a couple of bits I need just to touch up, just to make sure it's all got good coverage. And as what I normally do is I'm painting for tabletop standard and not showcase. So what I'll be doing is I'll be doing the single layer of paint, and then I'll be going over the top of the whole lot with a brush on of the quick shade strong tone. So now I'm going to paint in the net, so just have to take a little bit of time here, because where I've undercoated it in the barbarian flesh, it has sunk into all these sort of grooves, so I just need to dab that on and make sure it's gone into all of the little recesses. And what I'm using here is just an off-white colour, Mummy Robes. So it's not white, but it's not a pure white, it's just a sort of a shade down, if you like. And that will look nice when it's had the strong tone over it. So turning around to the back now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the whole of the back of the net. So the net would have been weighted, and the idea is that the Rhetarius would have thrown it over his enemy, or tried to throw it at the enemy to try and disarm him, and then followed up with a couple of stabs of the trident, which would have made a bit of a mess, particularly if he was fighting against sort of a similar kind of character to himself, where they were sort of lightly armoured. That would have gone straight through your throat. So yeah, quite a mess that would have made. So yeah, just coming back round and doing the top side of the net and the sort of bit in his hand there, just making sure that I'm sort of being as careful as I can be. And that's the net now done. It looks a bit sort of bland at the moment, but I say once that's been shaded, that will look fantastic, I'm sure. So moving on then, just show you around the figure, see where we're at. So what we've got left to do, we've got a few more straps to do over his shoulder. We've got to finish off the trident, and then we've got that big sort of shoulder piece to do as well. So a few bits left to do, and then we'll chuck him in some shade. So let's move on to the next bit then. What I'm doing now is I'm using plate mail metal, the colour plate mail metal, to do the sort of prongs of this trident that he would have used as his sort of main weapon. As I say, looking at Google, he would have had a dagger as well. This figure doesn't have a dagger attached to him, but the dagger would have been a sort of last resort, where they ended up on the floor having a bit of a wrestle, and you know, once they've both been sort of disarmed of their main weapons, they might have ended up with a bit of a scrap on the floor. So he's got that sort of backup dagger. This chap hasn't got one attached to him, so I'm not going to add one to him either. I'm just going to do what I've got in front of me. And then once we've done all of that, I need to just do the make sure that I've not missed any of it. A little bit fiddly there. And then yeah, I'm out of focus again a little bit there, apologies for that, that's my thumb in the way. Let's bring that forward so you can see what I've done. Okay, that's good, yeah. So that's the top end done, and then as I say, the back end of it been sort of weighted, and the length of this would have been pretty much as long as he is tall. So yeah, so if he was a 5'7", it would be pretty much the same sort of height. So quite a big weapon there, quite a you know, the other end of that, the end that I'm painting now, could be used to sort of club someone if, for example, the trident had broken or snapped, and he's got almost like a sort of club that he can use to bash people with as well. So that's the ends of the trident done, both ends of the trident done. Just going to go around that and just make sure I've not missed anything there. And then what I'm doing now is I'm doing his shoulder guard, and for that I'm using greedy gold. The shoulder guard is called a Galerius, or a Galerius, and that would have been pretty much his only sort of protection, is that that shoulder piece and then the padding, and that you can see further down the arm there. So not a massive amount of protection from opponents' weapons there. So again, just taking my time here, trying to get into all those little sort of recesses. There's a little bit of detail on the side of that shoulder guard. So that's that now painted, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the top of all this. This kind of like this is the lacing, if you like, for the padding, and for that I'm using, again, I've gone back to using leather brown for that. So just a little, just very careful, and I'm using quite a fine tipped brush there to get into all those little details. So the kind of what they are, you've got the bandage, or the bandaging, if you like, which is what it looks like, and then over the top of that there's this sort of lacing that goes over the whole lot just to hold it into place. Okay, so back to leather brown, and I'm just going to do in the straps that go across his back. So just taking my time there now, so being as careful as I can be, trying to get the shakes too much, and then over the top as well it goes. So that's that bit there, and then what we'll do is we'll turn him around in a second and do the other side. So let's spin him around, and that comes down to that strap there, and this is what holds on that Galerius, that shoulder guard. So just taking my time, going over the top of the shoulder, and we're all thumbs in the way at the moment, and then we're going to do a cross from the actual shoulder guard itself, and that then goes under that other armpit, so it just holds that into place. So we're now at the stage where we've given it all a good once over. I'm just checking him around to make sure I've not missed anything, or if there's any obvious places where the colours have gone onto areas they shouldn't be. And we're now at the stage where we're kind of ready to give him a bit of a dip in the old quick shade. So at the moment it looks a bit flat, that's the idea, that's what happens. And now there we are, he's had a good brush of the quick shade. I didn't dip him this time, I brushed him, and all those sort of recesses, the net looks brilliant, the shoulder guard looks good, and then all of that bandaging as well, and that protective bandaging looks really good. So I'm really pleased with how that's turned out. Also on the sort of little tassels on the front of his loincloth, that yellow, that's got some detail in that as well. So I'm really pleased with how he's looking. So let's just turn him around, show you the other side again. So he's now dried. I've let him dry for 48 hours. I know it says 24 hours minimum, but I tried to give it 48 if possible. And what I've done now is I've added some bits and pieces to the base. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to paint that base in, and then he's going to, there we are. So that's him all done. So what I need to do next is just add a couple more coats of the matte varnish, just to continue taking that shine off him. He's still quite a bit shiny there. He's had a couple of sprays, but still needs a couple more. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you found it useful, informative. Please do like, subscribe and share, and as always, thanks for watching.